Hello, everybody. My name is Craig Colangelo. I'm a senior solutions architect with PM Square. And just wanted to welcome everybody and say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, I guess, depending on where you are. Thanks for connecting with us today. The reason we're all here, and wow, great attendance, I love it. The reason we're all here is to get an early look here at the newest Cognos release, Cognos Analytics 12. And when I say an early look, I do mean an early look. It just hit, GA version just hit the software access catalog yesterday morning, actually. So we haven't had a ton of time with it, but we did participate in beta testing. So we've kind of seen how the new release has evolved, and we've spent some time with all of the new features. And just wanted to remind everybody that IBM's product managers are going to be hosting a webinar tomorrow too. So let me see if I can get us to the right spot here. All right. So tomorrow, yeah, IBM product managers are going to be hosting a webinar to introduce Cognos 12 and Cognos Analytics 12 in more depth. So you can find out more on this page here, which I will paste in the chat. Down under the events portion, this is your link to register for it. And like I said, this this release really just did hit the Access catalog yesterday morning. So they're going to do a much more in-depth dive. Today's going to be kind of a cursory sort of an overview in the very limited amount of time that we got to spend with it. All righty. So let's start off by mentioning, as I was downloading it yesterday from the catalog, I did notice that the installer version incremented a bit. It seemed like the functionality was still exactly the same or very, very similar, so much so that I didn't notice. Then again, I wouldn't have noticed because we used, my colleague Chris used infrastructure as code to kind of upgrade our environment. But when quickly looking at the installer, didn't look to be any different than the previous version. That the new image service is there, and or image layer that you can add to your servers is there. But other than that, it seemed pretty much the same. But just a reminder to always grab, when you grab the new software, make sure you grab the newest installer. Sometimes it really matters, sometimes it doesn't. Point is that it did increment up, so make sure you grab it. Let's see, so here, excuse me, here's the new interface. So here is here's Cognos 12, and here is our sandbox on Cognos 11.2.4 FP1. I don't know if you notice any difference here, but you can see the moniker with Watson is no longer there, right? And I mean, there's a really good reason for that. By the way, that was there for beta version. So I don't know if this is a late strip or maybe by design, certainly by design, but either way, it's clear that, some rebranding is going on, obviously, and occurring for, pretty good reason. And the reason is Watson has evolved. So Watsonx is the new iteration of Watson, and it's soon to be released. That's going to be out June 21st, I believe. That's Watson Day. Here, let me show you. This would be where you'd register. Let me paste that in the chat as well. This would be where you register to learn a little bit about what Watsonx is going to offer us, right? So IBM SMEs are going to spend a few hours a day sharing IBM's evolved generative AI platform. So when you think of Watsonx, think of lots of things, right? So on-prem, large language models, open lakehouse, AI governance, lots of other things too. So even if you're only involved in the business analytics side, of IBM. I think it's important to see what's out there in the greater IBM space, because a lot of times, relevant components from the other greater AI and data management offerings sometimes find their way into the BA tools, right? So it's always good to kind of be aware and keep up to date with all the other happenings in the IBM world, because they do eventually find their way. The relevant ones, the poignant ones, the ones that matter most for business analytics do often find their way into the conventional business analytics products. All right. So before we jump into our Cognos 12 environment, I wanted to mention that as of version 12, a few components are no longer available. So Query Studio and Analysis Studio, as we've mentioned in the past, we mentioned that they were going away. Well, they're gone. Same with Cognos Workspace. So we previously, in one of our previous kind of unboxings, we, here, let me see. We went over a bulk converter utility, which is really, really important. So let me see where it's at here. I'm going to paste this link to our YouTube channel for that unboxing there in the chat. But I know we had a chapter for it. This one right here, mass migration and converting. So right at about the 20-minute mark, you don't have to listen to all the other banter and stuff, but at the 20-minute mark there, we cover some cool options for mass conversion of that old content. So that bulk conversion utility is something that IBM included. I believe it was last release in 11.2.4, kind of like we show here on that unboxing. To do mass conversions. So there was always the ability to do the onesie twosie type thing with just a couple of clicks. But when you're doing a whole lot of content, if you're converting more than one or two, you might want to use this bulk converter utility that's included now in the stack. So if you reference that Meet Cognos 11.2.4 and go to that 20-minute mark, you're going to see a little bit more about how to use that bulk conversion utility. And that's pretty cool. But in addition to that, we also had a few blog posts, and I'll just throw one of them in the chat there about, obviously it was, a post about kind of warning that these things are coming to an end soon. And then of course, also showing some of the substitute features and functionality. So make sure you reference that as well. All right, so without further ado, let's take a look at Cognos 12. So the first thing we're going to notice here is that the assistant is new and it's now front and center. So the idea here is that this is a self-service for all. It's about getting quick answers right on the home screen here without knowing a lot about like what data source you need. Or what the tables and fields in that data source is. It's really what this is kind of like guided, somewhat guided natural language interface is what it is. So it's a guided experience with kind of some interesting features, things like autocomplete and type ahead word suggestions. So not quite a chatbot. It's more than that. But it's interesting. So let's show what I mean here. So obviously, when you go to ask a question here, you can give it some of the normal commands like load data or tell me more about, things like that. But let's start without setting any sort of a data source as our starting point, and just kind of start asking a question. So maybe I'm a business user and I want to know which retailer had the greatest revenue in 2010. So we can see our question right here. And it's saying, no idea. I don't know what you're talking about, Craig, right? So maybe I want to change this to a different data source. So you can really just do that by clicking change right here. And I believe I've got a Great Outdoors data module here. All right, and then, so now basically I've got it set to use this particular data module, right? So maybe if I ask this question, giving it the context of this data module, it's going to give me a little bit different result here. So now that we've given it the context of which data to use, and again, if you think about this, like anybody asking questions of this natural language AI is going to have sort of a good starting point for it. They're going to know a little bit about the data. They're going to know a little bit about the actual questions that they're going to want to work with, and they're going to be able to ask poignant questions. So let's see, what did it bring back for us? Here are the values for retailer. All right, maybe I want to, let's see, let's talk about retailers. And let's look at sales for retailers. It's not quite giving me what I'm looking for. So which retailer, let's try it again, had the greatest. And you can see as I'm doing this, I don't know if you noticed that, but as I'm typing, it's giving me some good suggestions here. So if I start with, we'll go back and we'll do which retailer. I don't think it's recognizing the actual retailer. And it's giving me suggestions. So all these things popping up right here are giving me suggestions on, which components I want to use. Let's let it chew on that for a second. And again, it depends on the quality of your data source, how it's modeled, how it's categorized, if you've let the smarts module kind of run on it, things like that. And all that'll give you kind of the, better results, depending on the data source itself. But right now, this is new. This wasn't happening earlier today. And of course, leave it for a demo to actually have this stuff happen. But let's go up and let's just look at a previous one. So basically, when I was using this earlier today, it was giving me really good results, and it was showing me that a particular, just interacting with this was showing me that a particular retailer in 2010 stood way far out above all the others, based on my Great Outdoors data module. And then from there, I had a chart that I could actually interact with. So I could either, create a dashboard from the chart or show related visualizations. I could share it with others. So if, I had this hooked up to, of course you can always do it by email, but if we had this hooked up to, if we had this demo environment hooked up to our Slack environment or our Teams, we could actually, include it in direct comms via those methods as well. But this is kind of like a good starting point for asking questions of the data, whether or not you know which data sources they belong to, and then getting some typically some pretty meaningful. Well, that's not very meaningful, but getting some pretty meaningful answers back. And again, it's kind of like a starting point. So from here, you can do different things with it and drill in on different components. But really, it's kind of conversational to some degree, and I'm sure IBM is going to show us a lot better examples of this tomorrow. But I think knowing the natural language to use in order to get kind of the initial answers and exploration and exploration isn't quite the right word, but the guided kind of analysis going from there is kind of important. So knowing things like show and explain and analyze and compare and things like that are important. And then of course, on top of that, knowing your data. So, knowing your data well enough at least to be able to ask kind of reasonable questions of the assistant definitely helps a ton. So I know that you can use new comparative words. So again, it's getting a little bit better too. The whole natural language portion of Cognos here is getting better with comparative and filter words. So things like things like compare revenue for product A and product B in New Mexico, or using filter words like above or most or worst or whatever. Which product has the highest revenue in New Mexico, or which product performed the worst in New Mexico, things like that. But another thing that I think would probably be really, really meaningful here is being able to show, so depending on which user group you are, so you can basically assign a default data source, and you can assign whether or not anybody can even use the assistant based on groups and roles. So, if you go into your, let's go back. If you go into Manage and People and go to your capabilities, there's a new section. Actually, I think AI was there for the learning piece, but this Use Assistant is new, right? So you can actually go in here and customize the access, right? So right now we've got all of our, kind of normal license roles plus a couple of others able to use it. But you can specify based on your, groups and roles and even individual users if you kind of went that way. You could absolutely jump in and give this ability or take it away depending on, which groups these people belong in, your users. And again, back to the whole data sets, that's another interesting thing too. So if we go to Manage, so if we go back to Manage and People and Accounts, and then go into it from a like a user role or group kind of perspective. So say for our Analytics Explorers, if we wanted to customize this, we could to allow a default data source. So you could actually set the data source here for the Analytics Explorers user group and say that, hey, I know that whenever they're using this assistant, I want them to use a particular data source. Maybe it's, this old remnant, the weather company. But you can do that and set it, by user group, which to me makes it so much more meaningful. Because I mean, that's the whole value of this assistant, is being able to ask questions right off the bat and kind of get you started in your analysis or your assessment. And really, if you, some people have the luxury of having user groups that rely, on all data sources, but certain user groups rely more on certain data sources, right? If you've got an HR user group, they're going to rely on your HRIS system, right? So maybe you can specify that up front as an admin and say that this is the default. So whenever questions are asked of it, start with this data source. And that, of course, is going to make it so much more meaningful, right off the bat for end users. So let's see, this assistant is always going to be here on the home page. You can, of course, collapse it if you want to, but it still shows the little bar. And then, of course, you can also access it from this new assistant pane. So that's going to render it in full screen mode. You can refresh it and start from 0, and it gives you some hints and stuff on how to get started. You can minimize it and it goes to the sidebar. So point being is that this new assistant is ever present. And lots of ways to kind of interact with it. But another thing that I think is really, really interesting, and this could, make for some really interesting use cases, is that you can embed this assistant in an iframe with, simple URL commands. So think about, the possibilities there, right? Think about embedding this within your, operational systems and having, your analytic representation of those, that operational data kind of exposed, in a really seamless, integrated sort of a way, right there within your operational system, just via an iframe. I mean, to me, that's really sexy. There could be a lot of interesting use cases there. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to give you a great kind of a demo there because it didn't do what it was doing earlier, and that's kind of the case sometimes with live webinars like this. But so be it. I'll save that for the IBM PMs tomorrow. But again, in my mind, if your data sources allow for it and you can specify a default data source by group, it's a pretty good starting point. Of course, I worry that things like a Chat GPT, entering the zeitgeist and with so much more kind of familiarity that with, in general, generative pre-trained transformers, that this natural language assistant is going to kind of draw some unfair comparisons. I mean, it is definitely generative AI, but it's not backed by, like, a large language model and GPTs that are, fed and trained by the internet. So there's certainly some similarities, but also, you got to realize that it's different. Either way, it's a really good starting point for business users asking kind of like these unplanned questions about their data that they can take in different directions. So, again, when I say unplanned, that's exactly what I mean. There are other similar things, like AWS has a quick site queue, is like their question and answer chatbot, right? But you kind of feed it, topics basically, right? This is a little bit more than that. This is more generative. So I definitely see this being a focus for IBM moving forward. It seems like a pretty good start, even though I wasn't able to show it today, but I'll bet in the future that we're going to see more here around kind of like seeding and training and using your own sort of corporate ontology here with this particular assistant, right? So for now, I'd say spend some time seeing how you can kind of make it useful for your organization and start laying the groundwork for the inevitable. This sort of natural language interaction is with systems has evolved past the point of like simple chatbot phase, right? And it's certainly only going to, it's only going to get better with time. So that's really all I've got to say about the assistant for right now. And again, I'm looking forward to seeing IBM's tomorrow kind of do a little bit more with it. Another thing I wanted to call out, and actually let me pause for a second here and see if I can't see any questions that may need to be answered. All right, looks like we're looking good so far. Let's pop back over here. So if we go to our new content view here, so just go to the hamburger button and then pressing content, we can see that we've got, 3 different tabs here, right? We've got my content, team content, and samples. So in previous versions, you could use extensions to add one more tab here, right? And it truly, I believe it truly was only one more tab. But with this new version, these tabs, you can extend it, right? So you can add, a 4th tab, a 5th tab, a 6th tab. You can strip some of these if you want. Point being is that you can add multiple tabs, and these tabs really, what they are, they point to any kind of folder in the team content, and you can kind of in the JSON you can sort it and filter it in specific ways. But here, let's look at this JSON example from the IBM documentation. Didn't have time to actually add one, but wanted to call out a couple of things here. So let me make this a little bit bigger. It's as simple as this. I mean, this is the JSON that's used to create the extension that you can use to create new tabs on your home screen with your content here. But if something interesting that I noticed here, and a new thing for Cognos 12.2, is this extensions property. So basically, that's a new feature that allows you to limit as a developer your extensions via that environment setting to specific groups and roles. And what that does is it basically takes in, you're specifying as a developer here which groups and roles you want. For example, right here, we've got roles author, right? Basically what it's going to do is it's going to evaluate the end user's like CAM ID identity, and it's going to look for that particular role or group that you've specified, and if that's in their CAM ID identity, then they're able to use that extension. If not, they're not. So again, that's a new improvement too, being able to specify and limit extensions based on groups and roles. So I think that's great. I think that's going to be well received for sure. Let's talk a little bit about the upload experience. So we'll go back to the home page here. And you can see things are a bit simplified. We've got, recents on the bottom, and then we've got this very, you can collapse this introduction to Cognos Analytics. There are new videos and stuff like that, getting started mechanisms, but we'll get rid of that. And we've got, I don't know if you notice here, but we've got these kind of two new areas here, right? So there used to be shortcuts for, how do you want to present data, create a report, create a data module, create a story, that sort of a thing. You've got kind of two entry points here now. So one is to upload data. So let's start there. And these are effectively very similar in nature. So whether you're starting by uploading data or whether you're starting from existing data, the UI behind each one of these clicks is going to be very, very similar. But I wanted to start with the uploading data portion of it. And just to mention that it is a little cleaner now. It is similar to other spots in the UI so that users are very familiar once they kind of get moving, whether it's with their own data or whether it's with data that they're uploading on the fly. We've noticed that the upload time is also faster. So there seem to be also performance improvements. So we tested with Excel files and CSV files in like the gig range or so, and just under a gig, I think maybe 600 meg or something like that. And there were noticeable improvements in upload speed. So based on our very quick, very crude sort of test, it seemed to be about half the time to ingest, a large data file versus 11.24 on our quick tests. And another really cool thing is that it wound up basically in our recents. So I uploaded something earlier, these cozips.xls, right? So I think before when you would upload content, you wouldn't see that file in your recents. Now it actually shows up there, which is great because most oftentimes, even though, users as they load, they're going to wind up in this new interface here. Let's see. They're going to wind up in this new interface here where they're have kind of a quick start. If you click next here, you have a quick start here for how do you want to start creating content. It recommends, based on what I uploaded, that we do a dashboard. You can also go right into the assistant interface or create a data module or exploration, or you can just skip this entirely and just get to work on it, right? And you can find it in your recents. So that's all well and good. And again, I don't know if you noticed that. I'm gonna actually let me click back here. Let me cancel out of here. The same interface that we saw on the other side of uploading content is exactly the same kind of I would call it a quick start interface that you're going to see when creating content from existing data. So again, like IBM did a lot of good work making sure that the UI is kind of like no matter what your entry point. So you can see if we choose I don't know, let's choose any old thing, but not an uploaded file. Let's choose this Bacon data module. Oh, Bacon, I miss you. Let's see. We might have a little bit of an undersized server here, but on the other side of this, it's going to have that exact same interface that we saw with the uploaded files. So it's going to take a look at that data module, again, existing data, not stuff that we uploaded, stuff that was already there, and it's going to show us that same sort of interface, but I'm going to cancel out of there for now. So that's really it with the uploaded files and kind of the UI entry points. But I wanted to also talk about, in my opinion, one of the bigger features here. So one of the bigger features that IBM included with this Cognos Analytics 12 release is the ability to incorporate local query caches for dashboards. So the way that pre-Cognos Analytics 12 dashboards worked is that every time a user sort of interacts with the dashboard, the queries are executed. So each visualization on a dashboard kind of has its own server-side query to fetch the latest data. So data caching occurred and still occurs on the server for individual queries at the visualization level. But that cache only improves, the performance when there's a dashboard that needs to or is actually able to kind of reuse a previous run. So, and again, that's a little more global, right? So it assumes that the same user, interacting with the dashboard and, clicking similar things, downstream from somebody who did it earlier, has the same security profile, same sort of access, same, is executing the same sort of queries, that the cache hasn't expired, things like that. But with Cognos 12 here, Cognos Analytics 12, a new data cache feature has been introduced and added, right? So again, the server cache still exists too, but this new feature is all about local data cache. So it improves dashboard performance by minimizing the server-side queries that are generated by the dashboard itself. So Cognos Analytics now builds and uses a set of cache tables to satisfy, and again, on the client side, the various queries that the visualizations generate. So it's meant to be effectively kind of like aggregated data tables that satisfy reuse for different gestures, like specifically like sorting and filtering and top and bottom and things like that. So I think of it kind of like how active reports were packaged with the data itself to some degree, because it's sending it obviously locally. But for aggregate beneficial data. So again, when you're doing things like sorting and filtering and things like that. So when the dashboard author chooses to enable this local query filter, what Cognos does is it detects and determines the optimal cache settings, and then it executes in the background to build the cache. So there's no dashboard, it's doing it in the background. So it's not going to block like initial render times or anything like that. It kind of preps itself in the background. So once it's ready, it's going to use that local cache instead of the server-side component whenever it can. There are some caveats, and I'm going to show it to you here in a second, but not everything benefits from this. So things like crosstabs aren't going to benefit from it, or things depending on OLAP sources aren't going to benefit from it, or things that use certain conditional formats. There's a list of 10 or so objects that you'll be able to reference here in the future of what does and doesn't benefit from it. But worth noting too that if you've got a dashboard that you created in a previous version of Cognos, you have to manually enable the local query feature. So let's take a look. So let's open up a recent dashboard that I was working with, this profit analysis in the samples. Let's see. Yeah, we'll open this guy up. And I'll show you what this new cache looks like, this dashboard cache, local query cache. All right, so we're going to flick it into edit mode, and we're going to go to the properties of the dashboard itself. And all the way down at the bottom of the dashboard properties, under advanced here, again, we can see the query optimization is there. The server data cache is still automatic. That's wonderful. That's great. There's still absolutely use for it. Again, that's more global, right? Reuse amongst, of a common shared data cache that sits server side whenever it can be applied globally. That's still beneficial and interesting and cool, and definitely still needs to be there. But this configure local cache is what we're talking about. So all the way at the bottom here, we're going to click edit. And we can see that there aren't any data caches here currently, right? So we're going to auto create the data caches. So what Cognos is going to do is it's going to take a look at all of the different tabs, all the visualizations, and all the queries behind them, and do some evaluation. And of course, it also looks at the data source as well. And it takes all that into consideration, and it creates data caches. It can be one, it can be many, depending on what you've got here in your dashboard. And you can auto-generate this initially. You can see once I auto-generated, that auto-generate on save is selected here. And then there are 4 different distinct caches here. And we can see there's a lot of interesting little tidbits shown here in the screen. We've got a kind of an indicator of status here off to the right. So, loaded, not loaded, loading, and error. We can see that all 4 vars actually did indeed load. So that's fantastic. We can then look in, we can see little tidbits of information too, like how many columns are there, how many filters are included, how many queries are affected by it or benefit from it, I should say, right? So let me show you an example. If I wanted to gauge how effective data cache 1 was, for example, maybe I'm going to interact with our filters here, and I'm going to change it from March to April. And I can see as I do that, that data cache 4, number of queries incremented by 2. So I can see that by interacting with date-based filters on the date-based filters effectively on the filter, we're getting benefits already from it. And we're seeing that these 3 different times already in clicking 3 different times, data cache 4 was used. So if we want to look deeper, I can actually click on the data cache name itself, and I can see which columns belong to the data cache, right? So I can see that budget reporting amount, the year and the month are in here. I can also see how many rows are included, right? So looking above here, we've got 24 rows. So that seems like a pretty reasonable cache. It's not going to slow things down. It's not going to be tough to build. It's not going to have extraordinary strain, right? So certainly we would want to include something like that, especially if we already see, this many, a few widgets already benefiting from it on the overview screen here. I didn't actually do a good job, or the sample didn't actually, of titling some of these different widgets, but 2 different widgets are benefiting from it. And well worth doing, right? So we can go back and we can do the same thing for others. So let's take a look at this data cache 1. Similarly, we can see, 3 columns, contact name, total USD billings and project type, only 21 rows, and 4 different widgets kind of benefit from it. So that's great too. Just a quick scan. Let's look at data cache 2, 26 rows, all fine and good. 26 rows for data cache 3. So again, these are all, think of it like an aggregate table, right? That's what it's including in this server side, or I'm sorry, client side aggregation that it's including. Now I could actually, and again, the person who's setting this would be the dashboard author. So in order to do this well, as a dashboard author, you kind of have to know your data. You have to kind of know a little bit about how users are going to interact with it. Of course, you already know this if you've built the visualization itself, right? But you can then include this as the dashboard author so that, again, end users benefit from it. We can have it auto-create. We can manually add data caches if we wanted to. We can disable all, enable all, reload all, things like that. So lots of interesting things that you can do here. Now, based on our, quick sort of performance evaluation of this, we saw that, especially when you're using sorting, sorted features within the widgets themselves, or if you're doing, filtering. And again, it doesn't have to be, filtering on screen via like a text widget, right? It can also be filtering up in the bars or in the filter tabs. If you're doing that sort of filtering, that's when you really saw the most improvements. And they were pretty great improvements. I mean, things were certainly lickety split. So again, I think it'll be applicable to different clients in different sorts of ways. So it's important to try it out, see what works. And again, with the interesting little bits of information that you can see right there on the screen, like how many widgets are using it and how many queries are actually being affected or being benefited by it. You can gauge, its usefulness. And then of course you can take timings as well on render times and things like that, for your individual dashboards for initial loads, and then, interactions, and then kind of gauge for yourself. But point being is that is a really interesting, cool new feature that I really, really like. And it absolutely speeds up render times for interacting with dashboards, after initial sort of render. So let me also show you another little thing. IBM, in the interest of kind of AI explainability, is how I see it, introduced in Cognos 12 a new forecast model explainability component. So We're going to use this widget in the bottom left here, the revenue versus sales target by month, and we're in edit mode, so we're going to actually include a forecast here. It should be able to, we've got time series on the bottom and a bar chart, so we should be able to forecast. We'll even add a few more things to it. I don't know if it's going to add any value, but we'll add a few other optional factors to consider to maybe kind of refine the forecast. Let's add another invoiced amount. Okay, so if you see here, see statistical details is kind of the new thing that it included. And when we click it, we're going to see some pretty interesting things. So we're going to see at a glance what the predictive accuracy is. So we can see here that for our revenue sum measure, forecast anyway, it's giving a predictive accuracy of 37.7, which, and it also includes these kind of relative scores, right? So in terms of predictive accuracy, that's about a medium. And it's a solid medium, you know. Looks like, you know, low's a little more towards this end, medium here, and then high here. So we're in the solid medium here. If we want to see more, say we're a data scientist, or you know, we know a little bit more about what some of these data science terms. Oh, good. There's even hover over with explanations. That's cool. I know MACE is a very important model accuracy score metric for data scientists. So, you know, again, if you want to explain to somebody a little bit more about how Cognos came up with these sorts of forecasts, it's now right at your fingertips, right? And when you've got, you know, seasonal trends and stuff, you can actually see, looks like we don't have anything that's playing too big a role here, but it would actually show, like, based on weight, if there were multiple things impacting this forecast, it would show kind of in a weighted format which ones are affecting it to which degree, which is great. So again, you know, you've got all this explainability right at your fingertips. And I think as more AI kind of takes hold and finds its way into our applications, you know, whether it's business analytics or operational, I think the idea of explainability is going to be really important. I mean, think about, you know, just the snafus we've already seen with things like ChatGPT, right? So the more, you know, not all data science and machine learning models can be explained. Some are pretty black box, but all the stuff that IBM's doing here within Cognos Analytics is explainable, and they're doing a very good job of showing, you know, those sorts of details so that you can further explain it and build confidence in your consumers. Because if they can't trust it, they're not going to use it, right? So let's see, a little bit of time left here. So we've got just a couple more things to go over. Also wanted to show, let's see, the new parameters view. Yeah, that's a good thing to show. So this was Cognos Paul's favorite thing. Not surprising, since he does a lot of work in CogBox and has spent quite a bit of time figuring out how to make parameters a little more manageable and useful, and he does a great job of it. But this new thing that was added into Cognos 12 called the parameters view and reporting is pretty cool too. So it allows you to do some interesting things. Let me find here, this is a report. Yeah, we'll do this one. So yeah, this guy here. All right, so we're going to edit just a standard sort of a sample report here. And we're going to see that the UI now includes a parameters page, or a parameters view, I should say, right? I don't want to say page because we've got pages here, but it includes a parameters view. So when you click this thing, you can quickly see all of the parameters on your page and kind of manage them in one spot. But you can also see default values. So and set default values, which is great. And when I say set, I don't just mean like static values, right? You can set defaults here using dynamic things. So here, I'll show you what I mean. And I'm sure we're going to see a lot more of this tomorrow, but let's take a quick look at it. Default values. So I see I've got my new parameter, I just pulled a string parameter over parameter 1 into the parameters section there, and I've got default values. I can actually add either a range value or a value, and I can base it on you know, a query, You can, of course, set properties, which is important sometimes. But you can have it based on a report expression itself, text, or a data item value. So let's click, just to be interesting, the report expression. So you could actually open the reporting, the typical, report expression UI here and build something. Say you wanted to, say we had a date parameter here and we wanted to specify yesterday as our default. Totally doable. Or same day, previous year, or what have you, right? You can absolutely create report expressions and use those as your default values to make that happen. I know in the past, yeah, some of my colleagues and I have, banged our heads against the desk trying to figure out ways to incorporate default values for these parameters in kind of, different sorts of ways. Now you've got it right there, right in the interface, nice and easy, which is awesome. So that's that. Let's see. Wanted to touch too on some of the admin stuff. So here, I know there was a couple of new things added to data server connections. So let's quickly look at that. We'll create a new data server connection. We can see that connection type. So we've got a few new entries here. You've got Azure SQL, and I believe there's a Synapse something or other. Synapse Analytics, okay? So those two new data server connection types have been added. So the way I understand it is that, if you previously had a connection via, SQL Server, they're still gonna work just fine, but this is a way to kind of get more precise with the type. So don't worry about the old connections, they're still gonna go. Also wanted to mention something. I don't think I have the audit, or do I? Let me see, we'll cancel out of here. I'm gonna see if I have the audit package brought into this environment. Don't know that I do, but let me check. Samples. No, it doesn't look like it. So I wanted to mention a few new things in the world of audit. So there's and actually let me go to the IBM documentation on this. There are a couple of new columns in the report runs logging table. So now you're going to get a better understanding using your standard audit mechanism here. Things like which host reports ran on, what the PID was. I mean, how great is that? If you can tie it back to historic perfmon sort of performance on a box and see which PID was sapping the server, and then tie it up with your audit information and see which report that was. How valuable is that? That's pretty great, right? So component ID, PID, port, things like that. That's great. That's now going to be included in the run reports logging table. And with that, there's also some new system health sort of reports. So I think this is interesting and cool. These new reports that are going to be available here in the standard audit package, again, not even the enhanced version, just the standard audit package, are all around system health. So, these appear to be, I haven't looked deeply at it, but just based on the names here, it looks like these are things that I, sometimes manually kind of create in the past when I go in to help out a new client kind of administer their environment. A lot of times I wind up, creating these sorts of things, or I hope that they bought PM Square's Thrive product in the past, because that's another excellent way of being able to administer and manage and understand your environment. But these things are reports that I typically kind of created in the past, right? If you look at things like that, reports running during crashes, I don't think that there was any way to be able to see that. I mean, you could, in the past, when things crashed, sometimes depending on the crash, the system was gracious enough to kind of rerun those again. Sometimes they would show up as failed, but depending on the nature of the crash, sometimes they wouldn't show up there at all, right? So if you can see report runners during crashes, if you can understand your longest runners or your most frequently run reports, or some of those usage reports, things like daily execution and weekly execution. I mean, that's pretty interesting and pretty cool. So that to me is a really interesting ad as well. Good point to pause here. Let me see if I've got any questions that need answering. Can you set default parameters for a specific user group or role? Yeah, absolutely you can. Oh, actually, you're talking about default parameters for the new parameter interface. I'm not quite certain, to be honest with you. I know you can do it for the global parameters, I believe. But if you're talking about like individual ones in reports, and then further specify it by user group or role, I'd say I don't know is the answer. I don't think so because I haven't seen anything to that effect. Um, but no, I don't know, and I don't necessarily think so. Let's see, what else do we have? We'll leave it at there, actually. So, you know, my hope with this quick preview was to kind of give you a better understanding of what's now available with this latest release of Cognos 12. Like I said, it just hit GA yesterday, so we haven't been able to spend too much time digging too deeply, but I hope that this quick preview kind of whets the palate and gives you sort of enough information to go into IBM's intro webinar tomorrow with you know, very specific questions and you know what things to kind of look for. So you know, I'd imagine I'll see many of you at the upcoming IBM Tech Exchange conference in Vegas. It's going to be at the MGM Grand in mid-September. It's shaping up to be something that you should probably consider attending. Plus, it's going to be nice and warm in Vegas in mid-September, right? Kind of pool weather. I know there's a really nice Top Golf too, right behind MGM Grand. Always a good time. But the conference is definitely going to be all things IBM, but there's like 10 or 12 different tracks that you can kind of you know, pay attention to, and it includes things. I mean, obviously, it includes a data management track as well. So things like data management, business analytics, lifecycle management, things like that. But there are also plenty of other tracks as well. So things like AI, infrastructure, security, even quantum computing. So again, like seems pretty awesome and pretty interesting to me. So, you know, if we didn't answer your questions, I know that there were a few unanswered questions there. Feel free to reach out to us. You know, you can keep up with PM Square via our YouTube channel. We have something like 200 videos out there. All of which are pretty meaningful. We've got you know, our blog on our website and our monthly newsletter. So feel free to reach out to us if we didn't answer your questions, and we'll see what we can do to get those answered. So thanks again for attending, and I guess I'll see you again soon. Take care.